Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming, and I want to say thanks to the organizing group, Nick and Graham and Maria Angela, to facilitate my travel and accommodations and so on. In today's talk, which is titled, kind of long, Assessing Language Proficiency Around the World, a novel approach to increase inclusivity and accessibility, I will talk about a project that I'm engaged in with a few colleagues, and some of you in the audience are authors of various chapters, so I thank all of you right away. But let me give you some background to this. My contention is, in the last 75 years of the field of language assessment, we have benefited from research in a few Indo-European languages and the language learning contexts. For example, most of the research, most of the test development and research that we know about that are published are mainly in English, French, Spanish, and German, and occasionally in Japanese. But the wide use of findings from these research studies encapsulated in assessment standards or frameworks, for example, the CEFR or the ACTFL, or the ILR, the AS Australian standards and Canadian benchmarks, they have not been useful in other language contexts. They're useful in their own context. So this whole project is to try and expand or enhance the frameworks that we are currently using, that some of you may be using. So I'd like to thank more formally Cecilia Zhao and Coral Chin, colleagues who are editing the work with me, and Nick and Graham, as I said before. And thanks to all the authors of chapters from Europe, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Czech, Polish, Norwegian, Finnish, Greek, Russian, Armenian, Turkish, and Welsh. You'll find that we don't have Hungarian. I apologize for that. And we don't have a few other languages, like Estonian and what am I missing? I don't know. A few, of course. Okay, the objectives of this project are multi-layered, if you like. The first thing is we want to know about language assessment practices for general purposes and for specific purposes around the world. This type of dissemination is not easy to find, so if you want to read a chapter on assessing Welsh, you're probably going to go back to a chapter by Emir 10 years ago. And probably similarly, you'll find that many chapters that we've had in an earlier edition are the only ones out there regarding assessing those languages. It's a lot easier to find assessing English in Norway or assessing English in Italy than to find something about assessing Italian. So I know that the ALTE group has endeavored in the last 30 years, as I know now, in gatherings like this, 63 of them, to bring together awareness and understanding and professional responsibility and ethical understanding as well in the promotion of assessment of your own languages. But we want to enhance this in the sense of through a publication, a single volume publication. So the first thing is we want to know about language practices in these different contexts. We also want to know about linguistic typology and how they affect language assessment, and I'll talk more about this in a little bit. And we want to build, and with that, we want to build local assessment systems and standards that incorporate linguistic diversity and contextual diversity. So that's the main goal of the project. It all started 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, with the Companion to Language Assessment that I edited in 4 volumes. And the 4th volume of that companion was devoted to assessing languages around the world. And this was the first attempt by me and I don't think anybody else had such a crazy idea. But my commissioning editor at Wiley gave me the scope to do this. So we attached this fourth volume, which was very different from the first three volumes. The first three volumes was all about language assessment, and invariably most of the authors wrote about English language assessment. In the fourth volume, we had the opportunity to expand to other languages. So it was time, they said, that we attempt a single volume publication devoted to what was then the fourth volume. All of you are familiar with this slide. It's the CEFR, in this case, the A2 level proficiency. And what I'm showing here is the different language groups and the A2 level descriptors and the key abilities. You'll notice that the key abilities for all of these languages are the same. They understand basic phrases and sentences, communicate in simple routine situations, etc., etc. And we think in our group that this is an underspecification of what has to happen and what is happening in your test developments. So this is like a skeletal framework. It's deliberately underspecified, allowing for the framework to operate in any context in Europe, in all the member states, and therefore for local groups to enhance it. We've also found that these frameworks, particularly the CEFR, has been adopted or adapted in other parts of the world without any understanding of the contexts and the linguistic diversity that needs to be considered. So this project is all about trying to understand the linguistic diversity and contextual diversity and how to enhance or add to the CEFR general guidelines. So I'll start with linguistic diversity. Many of you probably know about all the typological diversities that we have in terms of languages. So a very quick run through. So roughly, if you look at the typologists like Bernard Comrie and Steve Matthews, they talk about 6 major language families: Indo-European, Sino-Tibetan, Niger-Congo, Austronesian, Afro-Asiatic, and Dravidian. And within these large language families, there are subfamilies. So, for example, Indo-European is further divided into Celtic, Germanic, Indo-Aryan, Balto-Slavic, and so forth. So visually, the Indo-European language family would look like this. Lots of branches and sub-branches, if you like. So one way is to understand this and see where the connections are present and see where the diversity exists. Another way of looking at it would be like in a tree diagram. In this case, the Sino-Tibetan language family, looking at Tibeto-Burman and Sinetic languages and how they branch into sub-branches. A third way is the Sino-Tibetan language family in a geographical map showing the different languages. Basically, what you see in yellow is what is generally called Chinese or Mandarin. It's actually subdivided into Northern Mandarin, Southern, Southwestern Mandarin, and so forth. And the green is the Tibetan, generally what we call Tibetan languages. If you take a look at Dravidian language family in southern India, you have the languages of Kannada, Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil, and the lesser-known languages in that area as well. And if you look at Niger-Congo family languages, you have many languages here. You have Swahili in Ndebele, Shona, and Yoruba, Hausa, all part of different language families. So what we can see is that from the language, from an overview, from a high perspective, you can see that there are differences. But when you get into details, you start seeing where the differences lie. For example, there's phonological, typological variation. You have variation in the number of vowels, consonants. Some languages have tone, like Mandarin and Thai. Others don't. If you look at vowel inventories, There's a variety of ways of organizing language in different ways. Arabic has relatively small set of vowels, but some dialects of German and some languages of northwest of North America have large vowel inventories. Types of vowels are different. There are nasalized vowels and non-nasalized, oral vowels, short and long vowels, and vowel rounding. So all of these are typological differences. If you look at consonants, some languages have very few, some have lots of them. There are retroflex consonants, click consonants, ejectives. If you look at syntax, the three groups, you have subject, verb, object, subject, object, verb, verb, subject, object in different languages. If you look at morphology, you have analytic morphology, agglutinative, and fusional. If you look more in detail, you see that analytic languages, word order is very crucial, and grammatical functions are indicated by separate words, not by attaching particles. Vietnamese is similar. Now, English has some inflections, but it relies heavily on word order as well. Now, when you look at agglutinative languages, these are languages where you have a main root word and you have suffixes or affixes attached to the words. So you have examples from Turkish, Hungarian, Japanese, Korean, and Malayalam, and I'll give you more examples of that. If you look at semantics, you see in Mandarin, of course, is a tonal language. So you have the same word, like the word ma, with different tones meaning different things, and you probably know about this. If you look at color terms, you have different colors. The way people describe colors in different languages are different. Some languages are very basic color terms. If you look at the Berlin and K basic color term theory, you find that there are lots of differences. Light and dark distinctions. Some languages contain purple, pink, orange, gray, and so on. Some don't. If you go to a car manufacturer these days, or look at their brochures, you'll see that they've created new words for colors that may or may not exist, like aquamarine green or aquamarine blue or sea blue and sky blue. So, there's a lot of variation and productivity there. Direction giving is important and very different in different languages. Some of them have cardinal directions, like north, south, east, west. Sometimes I get a little annoyed when I'm walking on the street, I'm doing a Google direction check, and it says, go north for 2 miles. And where is north? But that's the kind of direction it gives you. It thinks I'm in a car, and I have a map on my screen. Other languages do relational direction giving, right, left. There's geographical, upstream, downstream, towards the mountain, towards the sea, position of the sun, and so on. There's, in short, lots of linguistic diversity. In phonological terms, morphological terms, syntactic terms, semantic terms, writing systems, of course, and paralinguistic features, which we haven't touched yet, but we will get there. So the main question is, okay, we have lots of diversity. Indo-European languages have typological features that enable certain assessment designs and tasks. For example, the C test and the close. Very popular in English and in a few other languages, championed by many researchers, starting from John Oller in the late 1980s. And he said it's an example of pragmatic expectancy grammar. And if you have a close test, you can probably assess someone's language proficiency. Now, so he claimed that it works for English. Non-Indo-European languages have a different situation when it comes to close, or, for example, also direction giving, or color terms, or head nods. So they're all different because of different language features and different socio-cultural features. The question that I'm going to get you to think now is, what do we do when we construct or design language tests, when we do test development projects? How can we understand all this diversity, and what should we do about it? I'm going to give you one specific example, and this is agglutination in Malayalam. And this is because we're interested in looking at agglutinative languages and non-agglutinative languages in relation to close tests. So here is a noun declension, for example. Vide is house, vital is in the house, vitende is off the house, vitalne from the house. So you can see that the root word is house, and in the house, off the house, from the house have attached particles. So this is something that's important to remember. Same with verb conjugation. So you have cheyuga, which is the to-do infinitive verb. Cheyunu is I'm doing. Cheydu is past tense. Cheydilla is if he or she does it. Cheydadingal is if she had done it. And Cheydanuan if he's the one who's doing it. So you see, if you look at the Malayalam in transcription, it's attaching of different particles to the root word, which changes what you're trying to say in terms of tense, in terms of a person, in terms of even case. And the last example there's patrangal, which means dishes. Karibichittu nandayirunnu. Look at that word. How long is that? So you have wash plus causative plus perfective plus past. So all of them, all those particles with the root word constitutes one word. Okay? So you can see the implications of a close test for a language like Malayalam. Here's an actual close test. I took a close test in English. It's a simple close test about a kite snatching a baby rat, which is in a school textbook in Kerala. And I translated that into Malayalam. And so I used the same kind of deletion pattern. So here you have the closed passage in English. Here you have the closed passage in Malayalam. And I then checked to see what happens in English and what happens in Malayalam. Okay, what happens in English is there are 18 deletions. In Malayalam, there are 9. In English, you have those kinds of words that are deleted, nouns, prepositions, main verb, auxiliary verb, and so on. But in Malayalam, it's much more complicated. It's not just one word, it's a word with many other attachments. So you have accusative case, noun, you have a demonstrative noun, you have meditative power, instrumental case. So you can see with the number 4, Makkalilinde, child plus plural plus negative copula plus aspect, without a child, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to get at is how do we understand the use of close in Malayalam? And the reason for my asking this question is when institutions such as Cambridge or IELTS or British Council or Educational Testing Service, many of the leading testing agencies for the last 30 or 40 or 50 years introduce a task type. It gets borrowed and mimicked, I should say, by language institutions around the world. So they think, for example, if TOEFL was doing close, it must be good, so let's do it, without figuring out what are the implications of using close in Malayalam. Okay. So here is the summary of close in Malayalam and English. So in a Malayalam close test, a test taker must not only know the correct word, vocabulary and grammatical features as in English, but also understand how its correct form so that it logically fits the surrounding text, comprehension and context. There's also case markers and postpositions, there's verb conjugation and tense, and there's also sentence structure. So it's a much more complex task type in Malayalam than you would have in English. So the requirements of doing very well in close in English are different from Malayalam. So that's my first example. I move on to contextual diversity, looking at a few examples of societal-based differences and political differences. We know that languages are situated in contexts. that are varied due to historical, social, political, and economic reasons. So there are countries which are totally monolingual, some are bilingual, some are trilingual, some are multilingual. And along with that, there are what we call dialects or varieties, and there's diglossia, and there are some cultural effects. So I've got a few examples here. Okay, the first example is diglossia in Tamil. Tamil is a Dravidian language used in southern India. And there is a distinct set of varieties, or at least two varieties of Tamil. One is called the high variety, or the literary Tamil, or the Brahmin Tamil. And the low variety is the spoken Tamil. It's the lower caste Tamil, I mean, depending on how you want to characterize the variety. So in the formal variety, you have words, phrases, expressions that are not really seen in the low variety. The high variety is used for academic conferences like this, official documents, news broadcasts, and formal speeches. And, an example of this is when I go to Chennai, I turn on the TV and there's a lot of Tamil news, and I cannot understand the news, although I can speak Tamil. And I can understand a lot of Tamil. But I cannot understand the news because they're using a totally different variety. They're using the formal variety. Whereas on the same TV channel, when there are interviews and discussions with, film stars or sports people, I can understand all of that. So the formal variety is reserved for formal presentations, and the low variety is not used for such things. So now what happens with this in terms of test development and test scoring? So here are two examples, two sets of examples. On the left side, you have the high variety, and on the right side, you have the low variety. So for the word road, in the high variety, the word is sale. In the low variety, it's road. It's a borrowed English word. Telephone is toleipesi versus phone. Television is toleikachi, and TV potti. Potti is box, TV box. Teacher is arasriyar, and in the low variety, it's teacher. Now, what happens here is when you design a test and ask your students, normally say young learners, to write a description or write a story, they are going to write a story or write a description in the low variety, because that's the variety they know and they use at home and with their friends. And they get marked very low by teachers, by examiners, because they are told, you didn't use the high variety. Well, they don't have access to the high variety. They don't speak it at home. They speak the low variety. If you look at it in terms of caste distinctions, the upper caste group in Tamil Nadu may be 10% at the most. The lower caste or the low variety users are in the majority by a large number. So test developers don't seem to take this into consideration because they think dialect is not a major factor, or diglossia is not a major factor. Now, I know that diglossia is a factor in many languages. German is another example. So the question is, how do test developers in using German, assessing German, how do you deal with this? I don't know, but this is a question that I've been thinking about. We also know about dialectal differences around the world. The dialectal differences in every language almost. English, simple examples here of color and spelling, words, soda and Coke, football, soccer, double modals where you can have like I might, could go in Southern English. In the United States, might and could used together. Students get marked wrong for that because they say, how can you have two modals? But in some dialects in the South, you do have two modals. Let's take another example. In conversational analysis, you find that turn-taking is a very important issue. And in turn-taking, some cultures require you to pause and wait for almost 1 second or 2 seconds maybe before you take your turn. So when you have speaker one finishes, and then you wait assess whether the speaker has stopped speaking, and then you start speaking. Now, that's supposed to be considered polite. But in many other cultures, waiting so long is considered lack of engagement, that you are not interested in conversing. And so the strict turn-taking is only in some subgroups, generally speaking, Midwestern United States. And there are other subgroups where you have a variety of things happening, including overlap, interruptions, and so on. Typically, people say these are from immigrant groups in New York City. This is, of course, a very big generalization. Politeness is another feature, how it is expressed in different languages, in different ways. Japanese and Korean have very elaborate systems, and this is a matter of some importance for assessing Japanese and assessing Korean, more than many other features. In fact, I was saying that when I went with a group of my students from my campus to UCLA, to Lyle Bachman's campus, I had some Korean students in my group, and so did Lyle. And when they met, the first question they asked is, "How old are you?" And I said to my students, I said, how can you start a conversation with, "How old are you?" And she said, "No, it's very important I know, because that sets my politeness markers. I have to know whether the person is older than me or younger than me. So then I know what words to use and how to address this person." So, politeness is very important in some cultures and shown in many ways, not just in vocabulary, but in words, in phrases, and with body stance and bowing, as you know, in Japanese. In direction giving, this is very important for test development, for tasks that require directions, where you have a map and you say, "Please tell us how you're going from A to B." And you will find that students from different cultures have different ways of responding to this question. Although our automatic scoring guidelines will say, please give high points for, directness and clarity and so on. But some people are just not going to do it the way we think that they should do it, because they don't talk about turn left at the traffic light, walk 2 blocks. That's one way of doing it. Or north, south, east, west, or referring to landmarks like temples, or directions near the old olive tree. You can have other kinds of things like there's a fly on your west leg, which I'm told is from gerbil in Australia, or enemy at 6 o'clock, which is well known in military circles for people who fly planes. So how people give directions depend almost on the culture or the subculture of that language community. So when we develop tasks for direction giving, we have to be aware of how we want to, what our expected answer should be, or what we will allow. There are narrative styles that are different, storytelling. We're told that students from immigrant groups in the United States write very poorly because they don't tell a story properly. And when you look at storytelling, you find that their stories are as compelling, but they start differently. So even in an essay, in an academic essay, you might find immigrant students giving an example right away. They say, "I want to tell you this example from my community or from my village." And the expected standard response should be, there are 3 ways of looking at this: first, second, third, and leave out all these examples. So if you want to put an example in, put it at the end, embed it. Don't start with an example. But this is what people do. So we have to be aware. If you're testing, assessing Malayalam, the opening line of the day would be, "Have you eaten?" which functions as a greeting, not really as a question meaning, have you really eaten? My grandmother used to meet her neighbors, and the first question they would ask at about 10 o'clock is, "Have you eaten?" Or "Have you finished cooking?" So the answer to that question is not really, yes, I've eaten, or I finished cooking. It functions as a greeting. So are we aware of this? And Stuart Hall has a very elaborate understanding of this, and he talks about high context languages or high context cultures and low context cultures. And typically, we're told Scandinavians, Germans, and Americans are low context, they're very direct, and so on. And then there are people from India, Japanese, Arabs, Chinese, who are less direct in communication. So if you ask for information, ask for a favor, ask for, can you join this project? In Asian context, you're not likely to get a clear answer right away. They will get around to it, but they wouldn't like to offend you if they didn't want to participate. So they might say, I will let you know later, or something like that, which actually is a no. So how do we understand this, in test development and scoring? And I'm saying local institutions and local test developers should be aware of this and use this information rather than use a template from thousands of miles away. I want to talk about academic writing. I mentioned this earlier. My last example is speaking and head nods, and this is particularly important for test development and speaking tasks. This is a head nod, this is a head nod, this is a head nod. What are all these different head nods? And I grew up in southern India, so this is a very common head nod. What does it mean? So obviously, head nods are so complicated that the meanings of a head nod are so culturally specific. For example, the basic thing is it's not universal. And this leads to significant cultural complications. In several cultures, I'm told. Now, I read a few chapters on head nods, and I collected these pieces of information, so I'm not, I've not experienced these. I'm told Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, and Albania, a vertical head nod, up and down, actually means no. Now, I don't know if this is true. Please, think about it. While disagreement is like this. So when a test taker does that, and you have a test scorer who is not aware of this, they might think that something's wrong with the test taker. An Indian head nod, the wobble, is very famous. It could be many things. Could be agreement, understanding, politeness, simply agreeing that, or acknowledging that you're going on. In Japanese, it simply means I'm listening, or in Korean, So, in summary, cultural diversity, contextual diversity is historical, political, social, cultural, language status is different, and educational, professional context. I'm coming back to the CEFR to ask the question, okay, so given the brief tour of linguistic diversity and contextual diversity I've provided, if you were to design a test for assessing Malayalam in Kerala, the question is, you would say that this CEFR framework is underspecified because it doesn't have the kind of information that you might need in addition to this framework. So I have developed a sort of form in which you can identify, is the test for an L1 test, L2 foreign language, diagnostic, high stakes, is it for K-12, is it a college, general, academic, professional, refugee, is it a national test, is it a provincial test, minoritized test, bilingual, plurilingual, translanguaging. So I think all of these different boxes should mean, I think, a different type of test development and test scoring so that you are able to acknowledge and consider the different varieties of context test takers come from. And similarly with linguistic diversity, where you identify what does it take for a language learner to be at the A1 level in terms of pronunciation, or at the A2 level for pronunciation. Similarly for morphology, for syntax, for discourse, for dialect and diglossia, and paralinguistic features like gestures and head nods and body stance. If you're doing video speaking kinds of tasks. And I'll dwell more on this in the workshop later today. That's all from me. I think I've run out of time, so thank you very much.